Hello, how are you?
Good, I'm Borough.
Laura.
Nice to meet you. It's a little crowded on this side of the room. Yes, would you need a notepad or a pen? Okay. And there's food and sandwiches in the other room, so please feel free to help yourself. It's going to be a long 2 hours. And if you need, there's water behind the door over here. There's a water cooler right over there.
Great, I found the water.
Terrific.
Yeah, definitely.
Will there be a bathroom break?
I hope so.
Okay, are you ready? Might need to run again.
Hierarchy reads, yeah, if you go out to the right, it's the first white door on the left, other way is bathroom. Yep.
Hopefully I'll make it.
It's good to put that
I have to
back.
drink a lot of water to stay
Yeah.
up.
Want another chair? Yeah. I'll have a chair. I'm just going to make sure you have everything you need. Not yet.
Laura. Thank you. I just want to make sure we start on time. Brian, can you feel a little breeze? Feels like it's a little cooler in here. Yeah. Just as long as there's a little, after a little while. Yeah, that fan was in trouble. Yeah, that fan was.
Very little croissant. It's tiny. I made like a big sandwich. So now I'm all have way more stuff than bread.
Is she a member? Yeah, John's not here yet.
That looks amazing.
Hello, I'm Callie. We're sitting next to each other. What was your name?
Andrew.
I think we're gonna sit in the same quarters every time. I think we should mix it up.
I know, I probably shouldn't. Maybe I'll.
Test.
John's not
Good.
here yet.
All right, well, welcome everyone. Before we get into the agenda, I'd like to just go through a few housekeeping items. The first housekeeping item really is thank you. Thank you for being here. Appreciate your time. It's a beautiful summer evening. You guys are busy people. This is a sacrifice, I'm sure, from your family and your loved ones to be here and be committed to our community, our schools, and our students. I'm really hoping that with some dialogue, some discourse, cooperation, and really a common goal, I hope this is a productive process for all the members. Really, the goal is to be a part of this committee until June 30th of 2024. I know that sounds like a long time away. So, again, welcome and thank you for your time. So with that said, just some housekeeping items, and then we'll jump into the agenda. Bathrooms, if you head out the door here, bend to the right, there's a set of bathrooms, and then down this hallway there are a set of bathrooms. Wi-Fi for folks in the audience, in the committee, it's the guest network. Emergency exits, if we were to have an emergency, the door that you came through, and you can see through these double doors, there's exits, and then there's double doors at the end of the hall to the right. I just want to let everybody know that we are recording the meeting. Audio, we have to adhere to the Open Meetings Act. It's a public meeting, so it is being recorded. And then just want to front load the election of officers. If you see on the agenda, there's a note. I am going to facilitate. I will fill in the role as the chairperson this evening, and then I'm going to make a recommendation at the end of the meeting that we can discuss. But for efficiency, I think it probably is appropriate for me to fill that role, but we'll have a discussion at the end. So, with that said, it is 5:03, August 10th, 2023. Call this meeting to order. Do we have a quorum? I believe we have a quorum. In this group, we will need 6 members to have a quorum. At this time, if everybody will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, we have the flag over here in the corner. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So if I could get, and we're going to go through Robert's rules, and I'll just tell you, we're going to try and keep Robert's rules very light. There's no Robert's rules police around here, so we will work through it as we go. But I need someone to make a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
A second.
Agenda's approved. All right, next step in the agenda is introductions. This is the first time as a group, collectively, we've been together. Hopefully the goals, we're going to spend an evening once a month for the next few months. We call this in education, I'm a former high school history teacher before in administration, so we call this bell work or an icebreaker. So the icebreaker is just to go around your name, your role. Do you have children in our district? If so, what schools? And then how long have you lived in the MatSu Valley? So I'll start, and then if it's okay, we'll just work counterclock. No, that would be clockwise. We'll work clockwise around the room. So Justin Ainsworth, Associate Superintendent with the MatSu Borough School District, primarily work with our secondary schools, career and technical education, secondary math, innovative programs, libraries, and other duties as assigned. I currently have 3 children in the district. I have a sophomore at Colony High. I have an 8th grader at Colony Middle and a 6th grader, big year, a 6th grader at Colony Middle. And I'm super excited because they're all, you parents will know this, all of them will be on the same secondary schedule, which will be really nice. So that's Justin.
My name is Christina Wilson. I am an elementary school teacher in the district. I teach 2nd grade. I have a sophomore that goes to Colony High School, and I have lived in the MatSu Valley for 13 years.
My name's Nathan. I have 5 children at home, ages 10, 8, oops, messed it up already. 10, 9, 8, 5, and 2 months. I am getting a little bit of sleep every night. So if you see me drowsy, that's why. And I think that's it. Oh, how long in the MatSu Valley? 8 years. 8 years. All my life in Alaska, 8 years in the valley.
Thank you.
My name's Katie Clark. I am a librarian at MatSu Central School. I have 2 children that go to neighborhood schools in the district. I have lived in the valley my whole life, and I started my career here in 1997.
I'm Melinda Dale. I would say my role is here probably as a former educator. I taught 8th grade language arts and health. I live in Willow, which is a long drive, but I'm happy to make it. I have 4 grown children and 5 grandchildren. I have subbed in the MatSu School District, and I've served on the MatSu Library Board for 6 years, and I belong to the Willow Library Association now, and we've been out here for 15 years. Happy to be here.
My name is Melody Wright. I teach at Academy Charter. I'm a middle school teacher. I've got 3 kids. 2 are graduates from Palmer High. One's a business owner. One's a brand new teacher at Sherrod. Started her first day today. And then a son who's a senior this year at Career Tech. And 2 grandkids. And 2 more on the way. We just found out 2 days ago are identical twins. Yes, very exciting. So yeah, I'm still wrapping my head around that. And we've lived here 18 years.
My name is Callie Ponder. I'm actually a former teacher in the MatSu School District, taught science. Currently, I'm not working I'm home with my children, my 5 children. 3 are in the district right now. I've got a few more that will be soon in the district. And I have lived in the MatSu Valley about 40 years, minus my time for college while I was away, but yes.
Awesome. My name is Andrew Shane. I citizen here. I work for Alyeska Pipeline. I have 4 children, one who just graduated from Career Tech a little bit ago, and then I've got my second oldest is a senior at Wasilla High. I've got one that's just about to start attending Wasilla Middle, and then I have one at Finger Lake Elementary, so nice full spread. We have lived here in the MatSu Valley for, I believe, about 9 years now. Born and raised in Alaska.
My name is Amber Ranella. I am a high school teacher at Wasilla High. I have a junior at Palmer High and a sophomore in college who graduated from Palmer High. And like so many others at this table, I am a lifelong Alaskan. I am an alumni of Houston High School, 1995.
I'm Nicole Smith. I have 4 children, all in the school district, 2 at Career Tech and 2 just starting at Colony Middle this year, twins. So we're also very excited about being on the same schedule this year. So I've lived in the Valley for 7.5 years. I've been in Alaska for 16 years. And I work from home online.
Hi, my name is Saul Friedman. I'm the general counsel, legal counsel to the district. Been in that position for over 20 years. Been in Alaska for 50 years or more, actually. Used to own property in the valley in Willow, a cabin until it was washed away in the flood a number of years ago. Still trying to figure out how to get back to that. And I'm here as a resource to you. I have things to tell you today as a starter, but for the rest of the meetings and your decision making, it's your decisions, not mine. And that's an important aspect of all of this. Thank you.
Amanda, do you need,
You gotta do those things.
I know I just put you right on the spot. I apologize. There's a script.
I'm not used to driving all the way across town during rush hour.
Yeah, no worries.
It takes longer than
Yeah.
you think.
I'm Amanda Cottle. Role.
Yeah, like job.
Oh, I'm a stay-at-home mom. I homeschool my older 2 children, and then I have 2 more children not in school yet. My children that are homeschooled, we go through Twinley Bridge, and so we are active in the school district with the programs and stuff offered through it. I have lived in the MatSu Valley my whole life. I left briefly for college, but I grew up through Snowshoe, Wasilla Middle, Wasilla High, and my mom was a teacher here for quite a few years, and now I am raising my children here.
Perfect. Thank you, Amanda. Amanda, there's, if you're hungry, if you need water, drinks are out there. So, yeah, don't hesitate. And then I just want to emphasize what Saul said. I think it's important to recognize this is your committee. So there's a structure, there's a framework. We have things that are built. We certainly will take feedback, and we can make adjustments and iterations as we go. We're going to be together for the next 9 months, but I just want to be clear. I'm here to facilitate and provide a structure and make sure that we have civil discourse and we can engage in discussion, but this is your guys' committee, and we're here to facilitate. So agenda continued. Item number 6, the meeting schedule the 2nd Thursday of every month from 5 to 7 p.m. And we will meet in this building. I anticipate we will continue to meet in this room. If not, if it becomes a capacity issue, we'll meet in the large boardroom. Quorum, we don't need a quorum to hold the meeting. It just, if we don't have a quorum, then it will be more procedural in nature. If we have a quorum, then we can make some decisions and we can vote. And then attendance requirements, life happens. it sounds like this is a group of a lot of busy people. Things happen, right? So if you can't make it, don't worry. If you just let me know or let Laura know, who's going to serve in the role as our secretary, keep minutes and summaries just so we can anticipate who won't be here. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to Saul. Agenda item number 7, BP 1220, the written statement. Oh, and I forgot to mention the policies and statutes that Mr. Friedman goes over are all in your notebook. So turn over the floor to Mr. Friedman.
Thank you. So, just to kind of set where we are, it's unlikely that there's anybody in not just this room, but anywhere in the Valley, certainly anywhere in any school in the Valley that believes that pornographic indecent material should be provided to students in the school, whether in classroom or through the library. That's a given.
Saul,
Yes.
Saul, sorry to interrupt. Could you speak up a little bit or have the microphone closer?
Will this work on? Oh, I thought it was just for
Okay, yeah.
Mike. So, and your decisional purpose through this committee is to decide whether a list of books that have been selected because of some controversy that they may have engendered, whether any of those books, or materials, meet the standard in the law, Alaska law, such that they constitute pornographic, well, the term is indecent material. That's your purpose, to give advice to the board after considering those books in whole, their content, and the legal test that is set forth in the statute. It's Alaska Statute 11, Title 11, 61.128. And it's called Offenses Against the Public Order, Distribution of Indecent Materials to Minors. And it sets forth the statutory test for you to apply. And I welcome you to, not just to the committee, and I respect and admire your willingness to serve, because you're going into and going deep into the things that judges and sometimes juries and certainly attorneys do, which is interpreting very difficult and sometimes vague statutory language, and also applying that language to a set of facts, which in this case, the facts will be each book that you're dealing with. It's a difficult task, and it's a rewarding task because of your purpose. And the hope is that at the end of your task, you'll look back with pride and feeling of accomplishment, and hopefully it's stimulating to you both intellectually and emotionally to go through this, because it happens every day in every courtroom in the country, really, what you're going to be doing, but in an advisory role. Before we get into the statute itself, I want to put things into some context for you. The books we're talking about are library books. We're not talking about curriculum material, instructional material. There's a whole different process by which curriculum and instructional material are viewed, both in the statutes, in the law, and in court decisions. There are challenges to curriculum and instructional materials. They may be based upon content which has cultural or religious, sexual even at times, and political, overtones. And we look at those as to whether they relate to the curriculum, whether they're meaningful and appropriate for the curriculum, where they raise issues that are appropriate for students to know and to explore and to understand. And the process in the district, and I ask that they be put into your books, is it's called BP 6144 and a corresponding administrative regulation 6144, which describes the process by which complaints about curriculum material are made, reviewed by the administration of the district, especially going to the superintendent. And then if the person who's made that complaint, and it could be a student even, it doesn't matter who it is, disagrees with the superintendent's decision, it goes to the school board through a process which is also there, which is Board Policy 1312.02. And the school board makes the decision, and at the bottom of that decision, of that complaint, public complaints concerning instructional material board, it says the board's decision will be based on educational suitability and will not be influenced by a desire to suppress or deny student ideas, just because they're disagreeable. There's got to be some more substantial reasons than just because we disagree. There's always going to be disagreements on matters like that. Those are different than library materials. Students in school with curriculum and instructional materials are required to take those courses for the most part. They're required to study what's provided to them. Library materials, the use of a library is voluntary. It's not mandated. And the courts, especially the U.S. Supreme Court, has looked at school libraries in a very special light. I want to quote to you from a decision of the U.S. Supreme Court. It was in Island Tree School District out of Long Island. There were challenges to books. But they said the special characteristics of the school library make that environment especially appropriate for the recognition of the First Amendment rights of students. And why is that? It's because a student can literally explore the unknown, discover areas of interest and thought not covered by the prescribed curriculum. The student learns that a library is a place to test or expand upon ideas presented to him in or out of the classroom. So we're looking at something separate and special in the school district, the school library. And your role, when we look at First Amendment issues, there's a thin line that you have to figure out which side is which with each of these books. Which side is that book protected by the First Amendment rights of free expression and ideas and challenges to students to learn, versus what's pornographic and indecent, which can be protected, students can be protected against. That's the line in the law that you are here to decide. So with that being said, let's get to that aspect of it. If you want to pull out Alaska Statute 1161-128, it should be in your books. Now, this statute, many of you probably never even recognized it or heard about it until the last couple of years, primarily maybe even this year, because these issues, though they've been dealt with over time, so much of what we're dealing with today has come to the forefront in the last year or so through all that's been going on in the nation. The Valley, the school district, is no different than anywhere else in this country. These things have percolated up into the public consciousness, and all of a sudden, a law such as 1161-128 becomes part of what we're dealing with. And this law, which makes it a Class C felony, which is up to 5 years of imprisonment and up to $50,000 in fines if you're convicted, relates to the illegality of distributing I call it pornographic material, but the law calls them indecent material to minors. And there's no exception in this law for school librarians or educators who are distributing these materials through a school library. In many of the states that have similar laws, there are those exceptions. And I'm not going to presume why Alaska doesn't have that exception and other states have them. It's probably not relevant to your decision-making, but it's relevant to why we're here, because there is now a ripple of fear and uncertainty that has gone through Alaska, and especially in school communities of Alaska, where school personnel have a fear that complaints could be made against them, asserting that they are guilty of a crime, a felony, because of the distribution in schools of these materials. And that concern of that has also come to school boards, including this school board, because of the fact that there are issues that come up about, the staff. I mean, if a staff member is, let's just an example, is distributing a book through the library that's been on the shelves before they ever even were hired, but they're charged with a crime, does the school district pay for their defense? What happens if they're out, if they're put out on bail and do they continue being paid? Those are issues that we haven't reached yet, and hopefully we'll never reach, but they all come up as a result of this statute, and validly so. They're issues that are legitimate issues, but whether we face them or not, we'll see. But what the collective wisdom of the school board and of the administration here has been, let's be a little proactive here and get ahead of this issue. Let's find out what the community, through your committee, Citizens Advisory Committee, believes or advises on these books, whether they are pornographic under the statute or they're not. And I've asked to put in here an article in the Anchorage Daily News, which you will see, where this same issue came up in front of the Anchorage municipality. The library board actually tried to punt it, using that football term, to the legal office, the city attorney, to say, why don't you tell us about this? And the city attorney said, no, that's not my job. This is a library function. It's a library book. You have an advisory committee. You make that determination. So that it appears, and I believe this is the proper way in which to address that issue. We don't want it to go into court and have a jury decide on behalf of a school librarian. We want to know in advance whether those books should or should not be or remain on the shelves, and that's that decision will be made through your advice. So let's take a look at the statute. It's not a simple statute, but it does have a format to it, which is really a process for you to review. The first part of the statute, and we can read it together if you like, or I'll read it. First it describes the crime. A person commits the crime of distribution of indecent material to minors. The person themselves has to be 18 or older, and they distribute to another person material that depicts the following actual or simulated conduct. So the Alaska legislature has set forth the conduct that it considers to be indecent and pornographic, conceivably, with the rest of the test, if it is contained in written materials, or it could be movies, it could be photographs, but in materials that are going to be distributed to minors. And those are listed. and I'll read them. This is a public hearing. There's going to be public discussion. This is not the time to be cautious, about words and meanings right now, because that's the core of what you're looking at. It's actual or simulated sexual penetration, the lewd touching of a person's genitals, anus, or female breast, masturbation, bestiality, the lewd exhibition of person's genitals, anus, or female breast, or sexual masochism or sadism. Those are the topics and the conduct that the legislature has said is inappropriate in books if the remaining tests of the statute are met. There's 4 things to look at in order to determine whether a book, in this case a library book, is pornographic or indecent. It has to at least contain these items. The second part of the test that's in the statute is the material is harmful to minors. So those are the 2 things. If this, right now, if that conduct is simulated or actual in these books and they're considered harmful to minors, that book is pornographic, indecent, and is prohibited from being distributed, legally being distributed to minors. The person is committing a crime, assuming the ages are such appropriate. Now, what does material harmful to minors mean? Well, it's defined in section C on this statute, 3C. It says in this section, harmful to minors means. And now we're into the statutory construction, interpretation, and difficulty language. The first thing is the average individual applying contemporary community standards, that's current community standards, would find that the material taken as a whole appeals to the prurient interests in sex for persons under 16 years of age. Now, a lot of things in that to decipher. One is, what do they mean by an average individual? And there's no definition that came out of the U.S. Supreme Court any time that is used. I mean, we can have discussions about it. I can, do further investigation review and tell you what in other areas that means. But I believe in at least in this, without saying more than I should, because I don't want to interfere with you, but I don't think they're looking at what Einstein would look at or what someone who may be committed, unfortunately, into a psychiatric facility, those are probably the extremes. And it may even include on one end of the extreme someone who's in prison for sexual crimes. I mean, those are not average. They're in the extremes. So somewhere in between is an average individual. At least they've taken care of the extremes, but not what's an average. The materials, the material taken as a whole is an important and critical part of this definition. And the reason for that is, and I'll go through that a little more, but the reason for that is this test requires an analysis of the entire book, not 1 page or 2 pages or 3 pages, but it requires, in what context does this material come up? You could have a photo in a medical journal that can be considered prurient to some, but there's a purpose behind that, and a justifiable one possibly. But it's the content, the ideas in the book, the purpose of the book, the story in the book, what it's trying to teach or understand, that is taken as a whole. And 30 pages or 50 pages of pornographic work, with a little poetry at the end, certainly does not make something, poetically appropriate, kind of thing. But, you'll get to that point as you read those books. But I think it's important to recognize the term taken as a whole has a purpose behind it, which is the book should be read to understand in what context these things, to the extent they're in the book, why are they there? Is there a purpose? Is there a theme? And there have been courts and court decisions where decisions of a body, such as an advisory or even a school board or other entities, have come before or have been challenged on both sides of the issue. One, people are favorable to that decision, people are against the decision. But one of the things that, at least in one court, and I don't mean to put fear into any of you, but in one court, the judge actually named the people on this committee and made a very point of saying they didn't even read the book. They just, for however they came to a conclusion, it wasn't because they read the book. They had a preconceived notion, or, in one case it was a religious belief. It was a book, I think it was a Harry Potter book, a religious belief that witchcraft is no matter what, there's no possible use of witchcraft, and that court said they didn't read the book. How could they even know what this is about? So that's what reading, meaning you take the book as a whole. The other one is contemporary community standards. You're the members of the community. You live in the community. Some of you have gone to school here. You're raising your children here. You work here. You have a sense as to what the standards are within the community. And collectively, hopefully you can come to some consensus as to what those standards are and whether they've been violated. But it's a collective decision, it's not an individual decision. And prurient interest, there's lots of definitions of prurient interest. It's an unhealthy, interest of degrading, sexuality. You can find definitions of that, just by Googling it. There's many of them, but they all demonstrate that it's the use of these materials to instill an inappropriate, titillating, and morbid, in some cases, sense of sexuality that's inappropriate, unhealthy, and wrong, frankly, and based on community standards. So that's the first definition, methodology of determining the definition of what's harmful to minors. The second part of that is a reasonable person would find that the material taken as a whole lacks serious literary, artistic, educational, political, or scientific value for persons under 16 years of age. So now we've gone from a reasonable person to a reasonable person from an average person. Nothing in the court's decision, it's the U.S. Supreme Court case, Miller versus New York, back in 1970, where they defined what the status is, how you determine whether a book is pornographic. Nowhere in that is there a definition or a way for you to determine what's the difference between average person and a reasonable person. And there's plenty of times in the law where the term reasonable comes in. And there are cases where a court, the Alaska Supreme Court has said, no reasonable juror could find that this person, that the facts demonstrate a person guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And so we're not even going to let it go to the jury. We're dismissing the case. Or there's cases which say no reasonable person could listen to this evidence and find that there's any factual dispute, and so we're just taking it away and we're telling, that someone wins on summary judgment because they win. These facts are undisputed. But it's not a definition of reasonable. And there was one case, when I was practicing, well, I practice law now, but when I was more involved in trials and whatever years and years ago, there was a case that came out of the Alaska Supreme Court where they made one of those decisions. Five people, justices on the Alaska Supreme Court. It was a 4-1 decision, and the decision was that no reasonable person could have found this, and so therefore we're dismissing the case or whatever. And Justice Irwin, very well-respected justice, been on the court for many years. I mean, no one ever had any question about his intelligence or his integrity or whatever. He wrote a dissent saying, I consider myself to be reasonable, and I disagree with you, so how could you say no reasonable person? I'm a reasonable person. Well, that didn't convince the other four, but it stuck in my mind as that's a tough test. You know, what is a reasonable person? And I can't tell you. I mean, as you discuss it, you know, you can come up with your own concepts as to what is a reasonable person. You know, you would hope it's a person who can listen to lots of ideas and make decisions, you know, make a determination and not be stuck in one without even wanting to hear others. But eventually it's going to be how you decide. And then the third prong to that test is the material depicts actual or simulated conduct in a way that is patently offensive to the prevailing standards in the adult community as a whole with respect to what is suitable. Now, that's different apparently from community standards. It's patently offensive to prevailing standards in the adult community. It's using different language, maybe it means the same. And they've already told you what, you know, what conduct is inappropriate, but now it's a question of whether it's conducted, it's conduct in a way that is patently offensive. So is it just a one still photograph, or is it, you know, put in there for a purpose to be offensive and is offensive to the prevailing standards in the community? These three prongs on what's harmful are not 1 or 2 or 3, but they're 1, 2, and 3. They all have to be met in order for that statutory provision to come into play in terms of a determination that the person distributing this material has been convicted of a crime. And these are words on paper. You know, you will bring them to life in your discussions. And whatever you decide really is what these words mean, because you haven't been given the kinds of detailed instructions that tell you what they mean. And so it's your job to determine what they mean. And that's why, you know, I welcome you into the depths of legal analysis.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
So you said in this section, harmful to minors is all three of these things. It's a prong
Yes.
or fork. When we're looking at the first section, talking about the distribution that knows that the material depicts the following actual or simulated contact, and then it's A, B, C, D, or F, that would be any one of those things then?
Yes.
Okay, just to
Yes.
clarify.
Yes, it's, yeah, you're not going to, they didn't intend that to be, you have to have all of them. But
Whereas
for
the
each
second
one,
section-
you go, so any one of those things is in a book, and to the exclusion of the others, you then look at, is it harmful using 1, 2, and 3?
Okay.
So that's the standard by which you do your job, and try to anyway. Justin, I think that's enough for now. You know, there's probably lots of other details and things I can talk to you about, and maybe if you want that down the road, you know, and have questions, to the extent it's appropriate for me to answer them, I will. But I told Justin in your first meeting, this is plenty to absorb, and so I don't want to put more on you than what's, you know, one step at a time is what I think is appropriate here.
Yeah, so I think that that's a lot of information, a lot to process. So thank you for asking a question. I want to make sure we leave space for questions. So this would be an appropriate time. You guys have questions based on the content that Mr. Friedman just talked about? And if you have questions later, as he alluded, he's a resource. We can also send those questions to Mr. Friedman. All right, so we'll continue with the agenda. We'll continue with, we're still on agenda item 7. We're in the written statement portion, which is in your binder. Mr. Friedman just went through the following BP, Alaska statute, AR. Those are there for your reference. The specific time period of the committee. So this committee is under under Board Policy 1220. So that allows the MatSu School District to form citizen advisory committees based on numerous issues. It could be libraries, it could be something in CTE, it could be an educational problem we're trying to solve, but they have the power to create and then appoint. There's 7 here that have been appointed, and there's 4 members that were appointed by administration. So the time period is from now till June 30th. And so at that point, the school board can decide to renew the committee, or the committee can disband at that point. So June 30th is the end date. Legal requirements, I mentioned some of this in the beginning in terms of public notifications. This is a public meeting, thus it needs to adhere to the Opens Meeting Act. Public notices, we have spots for community members to observe. It does not have a spot for persons to be heard because it is an advisory committee versus a policy setting committee. We're going to discuss books, talk about books. You guys are going to make recommendations, and then those recommendations will be moved on to the school board to make decisions. So that's why there isn't a spot in the agenda for persons to be heard. Seating is available to the public, and then generally follow Robert's Rules of Order. So I want to just pause. Generally is the operative word. We are not going to adhere to a strict interpretation, right? And this is why. We don't want you guys to be worried about the mechanics of following rules and the fear of messing up with Robert's Rules. We're going to try to do our best. I'm not going to be a stickler about it. I mean, technically, you're supposed to bring your questions through the chair. That would be me, and then we would go to Saul. And I think we can be a little, if you guys are okay with it, if you decide differently between now and September and you say, we want to have a strict interpretation or practice, then we can do that. But I'd like to relax it. Some of the things, just the fundamentals, the mechanics, and some of this is just for decision making and structure and focus, and just to make sure there's some equity and fairness and participation. And if there happens to be conflict or disagreement, Robert's Rules really allows you some tools to move through that. So, and you guys, we already started with the motion. I think most of you know what that is. We have a motion. We second the motion. After we have a second of the motion, then we would get into discussion. And I really anticipate that's once we get the protocols and procedures in place, I think that's going to be the bulk of the meeting. Is we're going to have discussion about the books that we read the prior month. I do want to stop there in terms of the discussion. It's really, I'm going to put my coach hat on. Really important that we have discussion. This is not a forum for heated debate, for contentious debate. This is not a spot for you to try to convince somebody. We're not here for morality and ethics and whatever the hot button issue is in the national landscape. It's really to stay focused in discussion about these books that have been identified and challenged, and really to make a decision based on Alaska statute. So I just want to make sure that, and I don't think it'll be a problem, but decorum is really, really important as we navigate this process. So once we have a discussion, a yes vote, all in favor, yay, all opposed, nay. For this group, it's a simple majority, so 50% plus one would be the simple majority.
Question.
So there's, yes. Ms.
When you
Vaughn?
talk about these rules here and how they're going to govern, when you're talking about like voting with a majority, discussion, all these things, are you talking about that we're going to be doing this per book? Are you talking about we're going to be doing this per, I don't know, it's a little vague on how this process is going to work exactly, how we're going to go about deliberating with books? Is there a checklist of some sort? How does that work? Because I'm just curious what that looks like.
Yeah, thank you. Great question. There is a rubric, so I was going to go through it at the end. Again, the rubric is a framework. It's in pencil, right? So between now and September, if you guys say, gosh, I think we should add this component to the rubric, we need to have that discussion. But there's a rubric to guide your reading process. My thought is that our goal is to read up to 3 books, right? It might be 2 that month. I believe we would need to make a motion about each book, second that motion, and then we talk about that book, right? And once a vote is made about that book, then we move in within the same meeting, we make another motion, somebody in this committee, second, and then we discuss that book. So I think it would be important to make a distinction.
3 books per meeting is what you're.
Yeah, I mean, and that would be up to you guys,
Sure.
Ms. Ponder. If you guys say, hey, that's too much, we want to stay with 2, you might say, Ainsworth, we're ready to read 5 books a month. That'll be your guys' decision. And I think some of it's based on the book that you guys decide, the books that you want to read. Yeah. Other questions?
Justin, may I say something on that? One of the reasons we were looking at, up to 3 books, and then, a discussion and then a vote on each book. There's pros and cons as to how to do it, because, your discussion over time is going to, change perhaps and get more detailed or substantive, and maybe what you looked at on the first book may not be the same as what you're analyzing on the last book. So there may be reasons why you may not want to vote automatically on 1 book at a time or whatever. And that's something for you to decide as you move along. But we have to put out an agenda. I mean, this is your meeting in a public process, which requires an agenda under the Open Meetings Act. And one of the purposes of an agenda is to notify the public as to what is going to be happening at your next meeting. There may be someone out there that's interested in just one of these books, and they don't want to come to every meeting for 6 months until out of the blue it shows up to be discussed. And there are others who may, want to listen to every book. But I think it's important that at least in advance of the next meeting, you identify, if it's a specific book or books you're going to be discussing, you identify those so that folks who have an interest, and only an interest in those, in one or all of those books, knows in advance that this is the meeting to come to, at least for that purpose. There may be others where that's discussed again, but that's the purpose of an agenda at a public meeting, to give public notice so the public can come and listen to what it is, how you come to a decision, not just what your final decision is. So that's fluid also, to some extent.
Thank you. Any more questions about agenda items 3 and 4? Okay.
So, yes, actually. So if you're saying on the agenda that we're going to hold a vote on 3 books, and then midstream we're like, yeah, we need to table this, we're not done discussing this 1 book, we're going to put it, maybe to a second meeting, we can do that, even though it's on the agenda where we're gonna vote on this stuff?
Yes,
Okay,
any
so we have some
action,
flexibility.
any action item on the agenda can be tabled and moved to another
Okay.
meeting because you're not ready to do that. And if many of you are not ready to do something, it's best to contact Justin, and the agenda can be changed and reposted saying, we're not going to be, this is not going to be on the agenda. You're not bound by the agenda, but it does give some direction to people.
Agenda item 5, resources available. You have access to district administration. You have access, we have subject matter experts in the district office in our schools. You have access to those staff. You have access to Mr. Friedman. So there's lots of resources. We don't want you to think you have to navigate this by yourself. Timeline for progress reports and final report, that will depend on the agenda. As I said, Laura is keeping minutes. There will be a summary. There will be updates to the school board. There will be updates to principals, updates to librarians and other staff. Relevant board policies, agenda item number 7. And again, the relevant policies are in your notebook in administrative regulations. Procedures to be used in the selection of the committee spokesman and committee officers. I'm going to propose an idea, a recommendation towards the end of the meeting. Any questions regarding those agenda items? Again, just nuts and bolts. Agenda item number 8, committee book selection. So we're going to, and Mrs. Ponder already asked the question, we're looking to read up to 3 books per month. Again, if you guys decide you want more or less, that will be your decision. The books will be available for the committee. Just a quick footnote, we are going to make a decision on the books for the month of August, early September. We have the books in the large boardroom. The books that were put out on the table were put out based on available copies. So some of the books that are being challenged, there's 1 copy, there's 3 copies. There are other books, there's multiple copies. So just to get the ball rolling, we felt like those are the books we would start with. However, this committee could bring a motion forward at the next meeting and say, we want to read book X, and then we can have a discussion about that. But we'll go through a process of selecting books here at the end. Just to reinforce what Saul said, members are expected to read the books in their entirety. Really, to get the entire context of the book, clues, to understand the entire book. I recognize that some of the explicit material is online. You may or may not go there, but if you do, please read the entire book so we can have a productive discussion when we come back together. Yes, Ms. Ponder.
Sorry, one more question. Are the books ours to keep? Can we write in them? Are we trying to give them back to you to use in the district? What is the...
That's a great question. I hadn't thought about that.
We can use sticky notes. That's the same sticky notes work, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we thought we at some point, depending on your decision, that was the book. If they're removed, then you can keep the book. If they were...
Don't say that.
No one was these students. We thought we would put them back in the libraries and give them back to the students if they're restricted or they're retained. But if you guys want a copy, we'll figure that out. But there are plenty of copies for each member. And just going back to the focus of this group is this: we are evaluating these books against the statute. Is it indecent material according to the criteria that's been laid out? And then I jumped ahead based on the question. We will use a rubric to assist in that evaluation, kind of a worksheet, and that worksheet can be amended for your guys' feedback. Yes?
I'm wondering, because when I served on the MatSu Library Board, we didn't have, you didn't email each other. There wasn't a meeting unless you were at a meeting. Is that, I'm assuming that's correct? That
Yes.
what we're discussing happens here
Correct.
and not with 2 or 3 people.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure that we're aware.
Yeah. Saul, do you want to elaborate on that, or did you, I don't know if you heard her question?
No, I mean, He's right on that. You know, the public has a right to know how you came to your decision. That's almost as important as what your ultimate decision is, especially when they're trying to decide whether it's a valid or they should object or they're happy with it or whatever. You know, it's how you came to that is as important really in terms of the validity and credibility of your work. And so for you to be talking to individuals and coming up with a group, you know, and then you don't want to segment yourself like that. Everybody should hear what you have to say. It doesn't mean if you see each other, you know, in the store and you want to chat about how difficult this is and, you know, why did we do this, that kind of thing. Don't, you know, I mean, don't avoid each other, but try not to get into the substance of what you're required to do.
Yes.
Can you clarify what we're voting on and what those votes mean? So if we vote that a book is sexually explicit, does that mean it's out of the libraries, or does that mean it's in a restricted section where kids have to get parental permission?
Yeah, that's a great question. And some of that is for this committee to decide. The general thinking is that you will make a decision on the book either being removed, the book being retained, right? The books go back into the libraries, or the books would be restricted. And the three R's. There's a little bit of nuance in the restricted part. I think that we need to talk about as a group, and maybe that's I anticipated that would be on the next agenda. Again, it's your guys' committee. You're making decisions that you're going to forward to the board, but the thought process is a decision to remove, a decision to retain, or a decision to restrict.
I'm a little confused because I've read an article online that I thought mentioned at one point that the books could be sent to the library for those 16 and older, but now I understand there's a parent permission required. Is that for every book that we would say would need to be restricted? They all need a parent signature, is that correct?
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up. So there is a new process that's in place. I think it's a really good process. Parents have the ability through registration, for those of you who are parents, you might have seen this, you can check a yes or a no button. And the yes button is, I want to be notified when my child, when my student checks a book out of the library. Now, it's not before. We don't have that technology at this time. We are looking at an app potentially to be able to do that. But you would receive a notice that your child selected a book. That we didn't have that process before. 5,000, as of 2 days ago, 5,000 parents selected that option. So that's almost a quarter of our families. And I think later, if we want to disaggregate that by elementary, middle, and high, we can take a look at that. School starts next Tuesday. People are still registering, so I anticipate that number will grow. In terms of the process for parent notification is going to be determined on what you guys decide about the book. So one of the restriction components could be, we want the book back in the libraries with parent approval. So that's a potential option. In terms of parent approval, you are also, he talked about curriculum. There's a new policy this year where parents need to be notified 2 weeks prior. That's curriculum within the classroom, and the parent needs to opt in to the curriculum, and parents need to be notified 2 weeks prior.
I guess my question is, let's say, for example, there's a book at middle school level right now, but this committee thinks it's more appropriate to be placed in high school. Is there always going to be a parent signature required to do that? Or it's kind of a...
Yeah, that's going to be your...
Okay.
Yeah, and then some of that's going to be potentially board policy.
Okay.
Yeah. But right now, if there's a book in a middle school library, for example, and it's not a part of this process, that book currently can be checked out by middle school students.
Justin, let me answer that a little more, I think. If you determine that a book is pornographic and violates the statute for children who are under 16, that is a decision which means for children under 16, that book is not going to be available whether their parents say yes or not. If their parents want that book to be read by their child, they can buy it for them. But it's not going to be in the school library. That's because we don't want to put any librarian at risk or whatever. Parents can't consent to some things that are illegal, you know. And so in that case, you've made the decision the book is not in the library for children under 16. You may decide that while, you know, that book is troublesome, you know, you may want to say it's going to, for students 16, 17, 18, it's not pornographic, but, or we're troubled by it, and we think that should be restricted for those under 18 and 16, 17 and under 18 for parental approval. You know, you can kind of make a compromise there with still saying, you know, we just don't want it to be otherwise, because who knows who else could grab that book out of there. We want to make sure it's restricted. For those over 18, they make their own decisions on those books. But I believe at least for under 16, I don't think you have leeway to say it's pornographic, but for those, I don't think you want to, but I wanted to clarify that.
Thank you for the clarification.
So that would be 2 votes like per book. So the first vote would be to remove or retain, and then the second one would be to restrict or not restrict. Is what I'm understanding.
Well, a vote that a book does not violate the statute is you know, it means that the book is not pornographic, even for under 16. So if you don't even need to make that vote. If you don't vote that the book is pornographic, it's automatically not, you know, so. But I believe that if you vote a book is pornographic, and then it clearly should not be in the library for access to students under 16. But I think your advice to the school board has meaning as to whether you still feel there needs to be some other restrictions, age restrictions or whatever that may be appropriate if it's going to remain in the library. I think you have the power to make that kind of analysis.
Justin, I just want to clarify one thing. For the 5,000 parents who signed up for notifications, that's not currently available. So if a student checks out a book on the first day of school or anytime next week, they will not receive a notice because there is not software available yet for that. I just want to make sure that people know, even though they signed up for that at registration, that technology is not available.
It's
So
not
their
ready day
child
one.
is going to be checking out
Correct.
books
Yeah.
until, it could be all year until
Yes.
that technology
Thank
is
you for
available.
managing
Even though
it.
they signed up for it, we can't offer that service
Yeah.
currently in the school libraries.
So are we looking at a time frame like within the next year or?
Oh,
this
sooner,
year?
hopefully sooner than next year. We're
Okay.
currently working with IT. And so, yeah, sooner than later, but thank you for the clarification to manage expectations.
I just didn't want people to be like, I didn't get a notice. Well, we don't have it working yet, yeah.
Give us a little,
Yeah.
yes, thank you,
Yeah.
Katie.
I do have a question, and this may not be the proper time, but it's for Mr. Friedman, as far as a little bit of an explanation on, in your 1161, 128, it does say in section B that in this section, it is not a defense that the victim was not actually under 16 years of age. So if we were to restrict books to say that, like, well, this is for above 16 years or older, would it be still a concern legally?
What this is referring to, I believe, is that if I'm someone who's just trying to distribute books to a minor, and I ask for identification to be safe, and someone gives me identification, and I don't check it or double check it, and even though the child is claiming they're over 17, and it turns out the child's not, I've given the book to someone who's under 16.
Okay.
And it's my responsibility to make that determination. I can't defend it and saying, well, she looked 18 or he looked 19 or whatever. That's not going to do it, because people will say that all the time. So it's putting them on notice. You're going to give this book to somebody, you better make sure, that they're over the age of, they're 16 or older or whatever. That's what that means. I don't think that's something that you need to be concerned about relating to whether the book itself is pornographic or not.
Okay.
Is that?
Yeah, I guess just when we're talking about whether or not we'll put it in, maybe this is appropriate for this age group or not, but it sounded, the way I read it, it sounded like it could be a potential doorway there, but maybe I just misunderstood it. So if you're basically stating that it's just you can't say that I thought he was over 16, so I gave him the book.
Right.
Okay.
And if you're going to restrict it somehow, you have, within the school district, that child's birthday.
Right.
So it's not as if you could say,
I didn't know.
I didn't know.
Right. Okay.
And it's not really, I don't think, relevant to the school library situation. Andrew,
All right. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Other questions? Yes.
As we select books, are we going to be informed if that book is currently in middle school or elementary school or high school?
Yes. Yeah. We will provide you, we have a list of the books now, but by the next meeting, we will provide a list of where the books are at, what schools they're located at, the number of copies at that school. Some of the copies are currently not at the school, right? They're here. How many times the book has been checked out, and we are trying to ascertain, it's a little harder than you would think, is the book required for curriculum, or is it just in the library, or is it both? So yeah, you guys will have some clarity on what level of book, what libraries, what collections, and is it a curriculum piece, is it a library, or is it both? All right, so some decision making, right? Unless are there other questions?
I have a question. So I don't have a copy in here of the rubric.
It's outside your binder.
It's outside my binder.
It was under the that agenda.
Does everybody have one?
Probably have it somewhere.
Okay, we need extra copies. Laura has extra copies of the rubric.
My mistake.
Election of the chairperson. So I'm going to make a recommendation. Here is my thought process. We would like you guys to be able to read the books, stay focused on the books, the discussion and the decision of the books, instead of the preparation, facilitation, all the things that need to happen before the meeting and after the meeting, and really kind of take that burden off you. So my recommendation is that I'm the chair. Dr. Everett is not here. He'll be here at the next meeting, and then he is the vice chair. But the caveat would be we're not voting members. So we have that ability. You can abstain from the vote. If we get into a position where we're in a tiebreaker, then we can break the tie. So if everybody is okay with that, or do we want to have a discussion about that recommendation?
I don't know about you guys being a tiebreaker. I don't know if that's a good choice, because that gives district a big, if there's a tie, we need to make a decision about what we should do as a group when we come to that, before we come to that. So I think that would be.
In what cases would there be a tie? There's an odd number of people.
Absent.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in that case, couldn't we just postpone it to the next meeting?
Just table it. Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm totally supportive of that. If you guys just want it to be the chair without any votes, without tiebreakers, I support that.
Yeah, I think it's great to have a facilitator, a mediator, but that we're on equal footing, the rest of us, to come to the table and talk and discuss and vote. Yeah.
So, we'll practice Robert's rules a little bit here.
I so move that Justin is the moderator, chair.
And I second that.
There we go.
Okay, so all in favor say
Aye.
Aye.
All in favor say, or all opposed say, sorry, all opposed? Okay, So, for the record, I will serve as the chair.
Do we need another motion to limit you?
Yes. Dr. Everett's going to go to the next meeting, so I recommend we make that decision when he's here, if you're okay with that. Okay. All right, now we move into the book selection process. So the goal is that everybody will go into the large boardroom. Laura has sticky tabs. If you will go to the table, you'll see it as soon as you turn left. If you would select 3 books, up to 3 books that you want to read, if you select 2, that's fine, from the end of this meeting to the beginning of the next meeting. That will determine, we'll do a quick count, that will determine the books that we're going to read. You will take copies, and then when you come back, we can discuss the rubric. Any questions about the book selection process? Yes?
I would just really like not to read the same author for like, say, all 3 books, like each month. Maybe like split it up some just so it's not the same.
Yeah, no, that means, yeah.
You don't want to read a bunch of really long books on the road either. In a month.
So you're just gonna take a poll of like what we selected to decide what was most popular, is that?
Correct, yeah, we're just gonna go out and we'll count the sticky tabs, and if you guys wanna make those nuanced decisions about, man, that's a big book, that's a small book, that's a graphic book, I'll get through that maybe quicker. I don't know if there are some books out there with, I think, an author's book maybe twice, but I don't think there's a book out there with an author 3 times.
Yeah. Most, in the room.
What's available.
Gotcha.
What's currently available. Yeah, so not all the books are currently available because we didn't have 11 copies of every single book.
Yeah, if I can recommend, I'm currently reading the Court of Thorns and Roses series, and they're quite long, so definitely want to split those up and spread them out.
Any other input or strategy on the books you guys want to select?
I did look up the audio version, the audiobook, which does give you like a general, if it takes 16 hours to listen to an audiobook, it could take you 16 hours to read the book. So if anybody's interested, I did look that up.
Well, I think that means high schoolers won't be reading
Mine will. Crazy.
Okay, so any questions, more questions about book selection?
So we're gonna go in sticky tabs and each of us randomly select the ones that we think we would want to read, and then we're gonna try and come up with which 3 we're gonna go with?
Correct.
Does that seem cumbersome to anybody else as time goes on?
Yeah,
A
so
little
it's
bit.
gonna get easier because there's gonna be.
How many are out there right now?
Laura, I
I'm all
want to
about
say there's 20 books.
So there's only 11, 10 of us, so, I mean, we're not gonna even touch all the books.
No.
So I'm just, I don't know, it seems odd, I guess, the way.
Some of us might not care. We might be happy for someone to say, we're reading these 3 this month.
Yeah, and be honest, I'll go back, if this is your guys' committee, we only selected that strategy so we can make a decision tonight. If you guys want to come back and we can do lottery of the books, if you want to do it, start with high school, middle, elementary, it's really up to you guys. We just wanted to get the
We
process
could do a
on.
lottery.
I would
Just
recommend
put
a
the
book
numbers
that's
in
at
and-
all 3 levels and one that perhaps is easy to understand and get through so that we can practice our process.
Well, I know I'd be more interested too in like what books are in every library of the district, or what book, because like if a book's only at one school versus one that's like every school, or the ones that are at middle and high versus, because like they're, like to me, like if they're on the list and they're on middle school, or in middle school, like that to me would be maybe one we should read first or earlier, because like I feel like obviously high schoolers are older, so like I don't know, like
Yeah.
so if a book's on this list and it's at a middle school or an elementary school, to me that'd be more of a priority versus like
Yeah.
just cause like, cause I don't know all of these books just looking at them. I'm visual too, so I might look at a book and be like, oh yeah, I have read that, or but like
Yeah.
just looking at these, like to me personally, having that information would be a lot more helpful in picking which books to read each month. Kind of thing,
So then, I want to make sure I'm tracking. What if we put it on the next agenda, that we discuss the book selection process as a committee? I can say, and we have the librarian, he's the resident expert, so correct me, Katie, if I'm wrong. Most of the books, not all, but most of the books that have been challenged are high school and middle school books. There are certainly a couple elementary, but not many. So just safe to say it's mainly middle high.
And it's also true that there's a number of books that are only one copy in one school that has not been circulating. So
Yeah.
I feel like
that
perhaps we
would
don't need a
probably-
long discussion about a book like that.
Yeah, and that would probably be a lower priority than something that's getting checked out every week or something.
Correct.
Well, and maybe we should start with the more popular books that we do know are being checked out. And I would hesitate to put off selecting any books this time around because I feel like we need to get on it. Because there's quite a few to get through. So maybe if we see titles that we're familiar with or we've seen or we've heard before, or as our librarians can say, hey, I know a lot of kids want this book, we can kind of move that up the list.
Yeah, and just for background, the books that were selected were the books that we had multiple copies of. We didn't select the books where we had one copy or two copies. We're trying to be fiscally sound. So we will purchase more of those books as we go. So
One more question. Are we making our recommendations regularly after each meeting, or are we making those recommendations to the school board as a whole at the end of the year?
that is a great question. We will need to bring the process, the sequence of their decisions forward to the board. They are obviously very busy. They have lots of things in front of them. So I don't know what their rhythm is going to be in terms of their decision. I hope that doesn't slow down this process, though. So in a perfect world, we would work through 2 or 3 books every month. We would make a decision. And then if they couldn't get to it, we would hold that decision, and then we would bring it to them when it's appropriate for their agenda. But for clarity, I think we need to bring that to the board.
So ideally, this isn't going to wait till the end of the year. Ideally, it would happen throughout the year.
I sure hope not, yes. Yeah, I'm hoping that we can make decisions, and it's more, it's free flow, and we can get in front of them, and then we can bring the books to them the next month. But I don't want to overcommit the school board either. They're very busy. Good discussion.
So, point of clarification for me, and I'm probably way behind the 8 ball. Where did this list come from?
So this list came from community members, parents. We still have it. We have a reconsideration policy. And that reconsideration policy starts with the librarian. So for example, the community member, the parent would bring it to the librarian. They would have a discussion. They would work through a process. There's a little call a worksheet, right? They would fill it out. They would bring it to the librarian. If the problem was handled at that level, then it's handled at that level. If not, that parent, so say it's a parent, could bring it to the principal and then have a discussion with the principal. If they don't like the resolution, then they could bring it to a district committee. That rarely has ever happened in terms of bringing it to a district committee. We suspended that process last spring because there were so many books being challenged. We didn't want to put that burden on the librarians. And so we brought those books forward, the list was codified, and so that's the list we started with. My recommendation, again, I'm one person, I can be overruled, it's really not my decision, but my recommendation is if books are currently being challenged, I think for this process to be manageable, they need to go back to the school. They need to go back to the lowest level and work through the librarian, the principal, and the district. And part of the reason is we have almost 60 books. You made mention, I don't know if it's realistic to get through 60 books this year. And I think we just have to, we have to get into a rhythm. So, yeah, that little background, that's where we're at with the reconsideration.
So when those discussions happen with school librarians, it's always really helpful to understand that person's point of view. So I am feeling a little challenged by a list when I can't talk to the individuals that have their concerns. So, for example, the book drama, I've read that book multiple times, and I'm still like, okay, I'm just not understanding why this book is on the list. And so I guess knowing who had the concern would be helpful to know what was their concern,
Yeah.
so that we can address it.
Yeah, no, good point, Katie. The process that occurred last spring is not a sustainable process. We really need to clarify, and that's not, and I want to be clear, that's not the, one of the tasks of this committee, is to create the reconsideration process. Our job is to evaluate the books, but we do need to move forward with clear direction in terms of reconsideration.
Is it at all possible to get a written statement from the individuals who nominated these books, even if they wanted to remain anonymous, so that we would know what their concerns were for each title?
Yeah, can I get back to you on that
Sure.
one?
I mean, moving forward, these books are what we're handling, so going backwards, I think is a waste of time. But then going forward, if we use the process for books that are going to be challenged in the future, this is what we're dealing with. This is the purpose of our committee.
Yeah.
So if we're trying to track down, we don't want to slow walk all these books. We want to get through them, we want to address them, and we want to move forward. So I think that's super important, because we'll read them, we'll look at them, and we'll make that decision as a committee.
Yeah, good point. And just a little more background, the reconsideration policy that was in place previous, and this, I'm not blaming librarians. They do an amazing job. They're very hardworking people. I don't think any of them has any ill intent. Have there been books that have gotten to the library that shouldn't have been in the library? Absolutely. And there are librarians that would agree with you that there needs to be an evaluation process. The current reconsideration hadn't been, the last time it was evaluated was 2000, call me Katie, 2008, 9, it was a long time ago. So it was time to review that process. We rarely go that long without reviewing processes. So just one more background.
Yes, let's
Are you guys ready?
Yes.
So we're going to select 3, pink tabs, grab some more food, and
Of course.
Karen, are you Ryan? Yes. Tell him how I said hello. How's he doing?
He's doing great.
Oh, good for him.
He's doing great. Happy.
Especially thinking on the line.
I know. Thank you so much. It's nice to meet you.
I mean, you don't.
Oh, no, I think just, yeah, just for going how many sticky notes they want to look at, I think. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right.
but it definitely is.
Well, both career tech and Paul, you're both keeping English too. So I was like, that's interesting.
My mom was right, that's fine. That turned out really well. I kind of stand for
Right, less options for literature classes. Just because you only have 2 years after to take. I feel like some schools do need the age. Because they're so much.
Yeah, banning does. No, it does. I do feel like, but and that's what yeah. I'm
Oh, right.
Whatever.
Well,
Yeah, sure. Maybe somebody don't need to read by your freshman.
Okay. Yeah.
I might have to like see if I can get this on my
Yeah, it's not going to do as much as yeah, that would be helpful. I mean, I can just Google what you think and then.
But that's like, so this is one where like you get out of
Audience members, if you guys are hungry, there's plenty of food. I don't know if we can afford to feed the audience every time, but we definitely have enough food. So if you guys are hungry, don't hesitate to go grab something.
I have nieces.
Jubilee.
So we'll call the meeting back to order.
You are only your Jubilee.
And I don't have this on the agenda, but it just reminded me, for those of you who are parents, you have been gone this evening. I don't know what you're doing for dinner, but if there's extra food, grab a plate, take it home to your spouse, your kids. Take the food home. So just quick announcements. The next meeting will be September 14th, 5 to 7 p.m. Again, in this room. We will provide dinner. It sounds like we'll need to put on the next agenda the book selection process in terms of a discussion. And then again, the rubric is flexible, can be amended. So we'll have a discussion about the rubric. And then I think we need to get clarity on what you guys are exactly voting on. I brought up the idea of retain, remove, or restrict, but something I want you guys to think about. So that's all I have. At this time, we can work around the room. And don't feel pressured that you have to say anything, but this is the time for committee comments.
So are we going to go over this rubric next?
Correct.
After we've, okay.
Yeah, we'll go over, we'll have that on the agenda during the next meeting.
Is that it?
That was it.
All right.
That's all I had.
No comment then?
Nothing in addition.
I was really worried when I hadn't heard anything, and so I was very thrilled to see the email and see how well everything is organized, so thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, I have nothing to add. I'm trying to get my calendar, so
We can come back.
No comment.
No comment.
I suppose the only thing that I would mention is looking at the meetings that we have set forward and the amount of books that we're looking to try and cover. We may have to really consider some other either aggressive approach to this or some type of streamlined way that we can get through all of these books, because by my math, and I'm not the greatest mathematician, but there's not enough if we're doing 3 books each session. So I think that I'm really excited to be a part of this committee, and the fact that we want to, and just to the general public, we want to make sure that what we're giving our children is something that is a safe environment and a good environment for them to be in. And we don't want to, at least I personally don't want to be the person holding back books that should be on the shelves. And I think that it would be good that we're monitoring, though, what is on the shelves and making sure that we're within those legal parameters that Mr. Friedman talked about. So if we can find a either more aggressive or more streamlined process, that would be in our best interest, I think.
Yeah, I think we can discuss that at the next meeting, and we can talk about what are the priorities, right? What books should we prioritize? And maybe those are the high school books. And then we work from high school to middle school to elementary. But again, I want you guys to have input and make that decision.
I think my only comment is that I truly appreciate the willingness of our community to just engage in this conversation and thoughtfully engage. It's kind of neat to sit at this table.
I wonder if it would be possible and follow within the legal limitations of splitting almost in half, where half are reading some books and half are reading the other, and if that half can vote with a pretty significant majority to keep a book, then we say it's good. If we have a significant or a big split, or maybe a majority saying we need to pull the book, then we have others chime in. I don't know. I just wonder if it's the best use of our time to have 11 people reading the book, every single month, and if we could accomplish more.
We could do literature circles.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Because, I mean, to me, I think some of them, we've had librarians who've read these and they're like, there is literally nothing in this book. And so if she can say that, and we can say, all right, let's have half these people read it. If they all agree with her, I think that's good. If we have maybe a little bit more dissent in some of these books, then we could say, all right, next month, the other half needs to read this book as well.
Yeah, I think we definitely need to have a discussion about prioritization.
I mean, with all due respect, we have this committee. Like, we aren't just having librarians decide for a reason. We have a community effort, and there's a very specific reason for that. So we definitely don't want to just say, oh, we got to take the librarian's word for it. But with all due respect, because we're here because that didn't work.
I'm more meaning like, if we've got 3 people already saying it's good, we can then have the other half of us read it and not be duplicating efforts if most people are saying
I think
that.
it's really important that this board was selected to represent a diverse group, and when you start changing into 2 smaller groups, you lose that diversity. So my opinion would be that we all read the same book, and if it takes us more than a year to get through 56 books, then maybe it just takes us more than a year.
We could also set, like, say we pick 3 books that are like the required reading for the month, but then we could have 1 to 2 books listed so we all know which ones they are that are optional readers, where like if we get to them, we get to them, but then they might also get pushed back. And that could, because some of the books are much longer, some are much shorter. So there might be a month where we accidentally pick 3 books and everyone's through them in 2 days. Like, but over a week or whatever, or 2 weeks or something. And that might be a month where then we can squeeze in those extra books and it wouldn't be like but like that would be an option possibly, to have the optional books that may or may not be gotten to, but they're on that list and they can just.
Yeah, maybe we move it up to, it's not up to 3, it's up to 4, it's up to 5, and then you guys just make kind of a month by month decision on how many you think you can read. Because I know, listening to you, some of the books are dense, there's lots of content, and then some of them aren't as dense. And so, yeah, I think we make that decision case by case.
It might work well if we are able to select someone that is knowledgeable with the books and say like, hey, these are the ones we should focus on, so that way we can get a diverse, amount of like one that's, okay, this one's going to take you a little while to read. This one probably not so much, and this one you can breeze through, and then there's one more that's going to take you a while, or something like that, to where it's easier for us to maybe a quicker organization of getting through these things, so.
Yeah, I think we have staff who could organize it in that manner. So there's a lot of head nodding. I think this is a discussion at the next meeting to talk about the selection of the books.
Yes.
Yeah, you had a comment. Yeah, that was your question. Yeah. Saul, any closing comments?
No, just not of any great extent. I just want to say, as a committee, you can have subcommittees, but subcommittee you would want to be diverse, just like you were saying, so that at least you have somebody from each composition. But those are things that, it's not something you cannot have, legally. You could have subcommittees. Otherwise, just thank you for your attention. I appreciate it, and I appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah, I'll close. Thank you for your time. And again, I know you guys are busy people. You're away from your families, your loved ones. I'm excited to be a part of this process. It's taken a little while to get this off the ground. So thank you for being here. Drive safe, and again, take some food home with you guys. Thank you.
Are we taking
What books are we taking?
Why don't you guys grab your books?
No,
We don't know what they are yet.
I have all my books.
Good luck, guys. See you next week. I also suggested she grab 4, so that way if like amongst the voting there's duplicates, like there's 2 graphic novels, we could toss out one of them and do it.
And what if there's not enough? Do we just like share them and tell each other when we're done?
have 11.
We had a process.
Because it didn't.
Are those the books, Jess?
Yeah, these are the books that you
So do
guys
you wanna
select.
read
Can
those
you,
titles?
can you state what they are?
Drama and then the,
So there was 4.
oh, good, we did 4.
Yeah, so for the record,
That's
I'll
good.
read them just so, because we have,
Yeah, yeah.
right, where people are listening in. So the books that were selected, it's Perfectly Normal, The Lovely Bones, Drama, and you have a 4th book, The Bluest Eyes. And I believe the 4th book is if you can get to it, you can get to it. Is that my understanding?
Is the Bluest Eye novel in verse? No. No? Okay.
It's probably the heavier of the 4.
I would say, yes, Toni
The
Morrison.
Bluest Eyes is the last book.
That's gonna be the heavier one. It is used in curriculum? Is it a,
It's not a requirement.
is it AP?
IB.
Oh, it's IB? Okay, good to know.
What's IB?
Yeah, I think it's an IB book.
Hallmark
I don't know if
instead
it's
of
an
an
AP book,
Hallmark.
Katie.
What did you say IB was?
IB is International
Yeah.
Baccalaureate, it's offered at Palmer High. But we'd have to look it up. You guys, all of this stuff is Googleable, like it'll tell you where, you know what I mean? You can look it up and find out where it's used. I don't believe the other 3 are though in curriculum at all.
I don't believe so,
Yeah.
no. So I apologize, I thought you guys already had your reports. So, anything else before we adjourn?
Can we just have a real quick clarification around that 4th book? Or maybe even just kind of do a quick touch-in? Like, for example, I'm happy to commit to those 4 so that we could kind of get that progress moving along. Would that be a reasonable thing to do?
Yeah, I think we
Oh,
can
yeah.
just see how it goes.
With 2 graphic novels, I think that's super doable.
This is an hour or 2.
Yeah, it's very fast.
Pretty good book.
Yeah,
Oh, there's one textbook type.
but it has a lot of pictures.
So it's more of a.
And again, you guys can come to the next meeting and say, hey,
That
we
didn't
weren't able to
work.
get that book,
Yeah.
Is that
we
this
table
one?
it, and we're gonna read it next month.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think that's reasonable.
The other, I saw that one,
And then this is the 4th one.
the blue sign, is it?
And then this is.
Oh, the perfectly
Yes.
normal, okay, thank you.
The book Perfectly Normal isn't in every elementary school, one's only a couple.
Yes, we'll get the list to you guys.
And copyright date, that kind of stuff's also important on a nonfiction book.
Yeah, we get that information.
Actually, I'm sorry. I don't mean to drag us out any longer, but if for whatever reason the committee member is not able to make the meeting, but has reviewed the books and does know what their vote's going to be, how does that work? If they're not here, they can't vote?
We could, that's a great question. We could set up a teleconference, so it's a voice vote, if they can't be here. If they can't be here in person or voice vote, then they would abstain from voting. But we can still vote as a committee as long as we have a quorum.
Just to confirm, that's per policies and procedures of committees, correct? Okay.
Correct, yes, Open Meetings Act.
If that's in line with the P&P, then I'm fine.
Any other closing comments, questions? Okay, well, thank you for your time. Drive safe, grab some food.
They don't want